First of all, we'll discuss the understanding of management's responsibilities. Prior to the acceptance of examination engagement, the practitioner is required to discuss the management's responsibilities in cybersecurity risk management examination and establish an understanding with the management about not only its responsibilities but also the practitioner's responsibilities. As well, we've learned in Chapter 1, management is responsible for the entity's cybersecurity risk management programs. Its responsibilities include identifying the types of information that are created, used, and stored by the entity and its systems, and identifying the entity's cybersecurity objectives. Management's responsibilities also include identifying and analyzing the risks that could prevent the entities from achieving its cybersecurity objectives, and designing, implementing, operating, monitoring, and documenting controls that are effective to achieve the entity's cybersecurity objectives. Furthermore, the practitioner could also include several other responsibilities while establishing an understanding with the management. One of such responsibilities is defining the scope of the engagement, including whether the examination will cover the entity's cybersecurity risk management program or only a portion of that program, and the time frame of the examination. Other responsibilities is selecting the description and control criteria that will be used to evaluate the description of the entity's cybersecurity risk management program and the effectiveness of controls within that program. In addition, management is responsible for preparing the description of the entity's cybersecurity risk management program in accordance with the description criteria. The management is also responsible for preparing a written assertion regarding whether the description is presented in accordance with the description criteria and the controls were effective to achieve the entity's cybersecurity objectives. Furthermore, the management should have a reasonable basis for its assertions. Besides what we talked about in cybersecurity risk management examination, management should agree to provide practitioners with access of all information of which management is aware of, access to additional information that the practitioner may request, and unrestricted access to persons whom the practitioner determines is necessary to obtain evidence. Additionally, management should agree to provide written acknowledgement that internal auditors providing direct assistance will be allowed to follow the practitioner's instructions without management intervention. Finally, management should agree to provide written representations at the conclusion of the engagement. The written representations contain all known matters that might contradict the presentation of description, any communication from the regulatory agencies, and others related to the presentation of description or effectiveness of controls, and all deficiencies in internal controls relevant to the engagement. The written representations also include any known fraud or non-compliance with laws or regulations, and any known events that are subsequent to the period covered by the examination engagement. Management is required to acknowledge above-mentioned responsibilities in an engagement letter or other suitable form of written communication. Next, we'll discuss the understanding of practitioners' responsibilities. The practitioners have several responsibilities during the engagement acceptance and planning of the cybersecurity risk management examination. First, the practitioner is required to determine whether to accept or continue a cybersecurity risk management examination for a particular client by considering whether the preconditions have been met. Later in this lecture, we'll introduce the preconditions for accepting an examination engagement. Another responsibility of the practitioner is to establish an understanding with the management about the engagement, including the responsibility of both parties, and also to reach an understanding with the management regarding their willingness and ability to provide a written assertion at the conclusion of an engagement. Establishing an overall strategy for a cybersecurity risk management examination is another responsibility. Finally, to support the assessment procedures, the practitioner is responsible for obtaining an understanding of the entity's cybersecurity objectives and how the cybersecurity risk management program is designed, implemented, and operated to achieve such objectives. In determining whether to accept or continue a cybersecurity risk management examination engagement, the practitioner should apply the policies and procedures that its CPA firm has developed in response to the quality control requirements in the AICPA professional standards. In general, the practitioner assesses the integrity of the entity, including its management, significant shareholders, principal owners. The practitioner then only accepts and continues the examination engagement if he or she finds no information indicating the lack of integrity. According to ATC section, there are a number of preconditions that should be met before accepting or continuing an attestation engagement. Specifically, the practitioner should accept or continue cybersecurity risk management examination only if he or she is independent in accordance with the AICPA Code of Professional Conduct. Another precondition is that management accepts its responsibilities, preparing the description of the entity's cybersecurity risk management program in accordance with the description criteria, as well as the effectiveness of controls for achieving the cybersecurity objectives. Furthermore, the subject matters of the cybersecurity risk management examination should be appropriate, and the description and control criteria used to prepare and evaluate the subject matters should be suitable and available to users of the report. In addition, the practitioner should be able to obtain the necessary evidence to arrive his or her opinion on the description and on the effectiveness of controls. The practitioner should also have access to all information relevant to assess the subject matter. Additional information that he or she may request and unrestricted access to entity personnel. If one or more of these preconditions are not present, the practitioner should discuss the matter with management and attempt to resolve the issues before accepting or continuing the engagement. Furthermore, the practitioner should accept or continue the engagement only when he or she believes that the relevant ethical requirements, including independence, are satisfied, and also concludes that the individuals have the appropriate competence and capabilities to perform the engagement. Additionally, the practitioner should have reached an understanding with the engagement party about the terms of the engagement, and should have plans to include a written opinion expressed in his or her examination report. Finally, the practitioner also needs to consider whether the management is experiencing excessive pressure that may influence the actions during the course of engagement. Some considerations should be taken into account in determining whether a subject matter is appropriate in specific cybersecurity risk management examination. Such considerations include whether the entity's cybersecurity risk management program is likely to meet the needs of report users under two circumstances. One is when the subject matter is only a portion of the entity's cybersecurity risk management. Another consideration is whether management is likely to have a reasonable basis for its assertion. Furthermore, the practitioner needs to consider several factors when determining whether the subject matter of the engagement is appropriate in the particular circumstances. Specifically, the practitioner needs to consider whether users of the cybersecurity risk management examination report are likely to understand other factors related to the engagement, such as the nature of the engagement. Another factor is whether the description criteria used to evaluate the presentation of the description can be understood by users. Also, the practitioner needs to identify third parties such as customers, vendors, and business partners who have access to the entity's systems and consider whether the effect of these third parties are addressed by the program and can be understood by the users. The practitioners also needs to consider whether the users of the examination report can understand the control criteria that are used to evaluate the effectiveness of controls. The last factor is whether the period of time over which the engagement is to be performed can meet the information needs of the users. If the users are unlikely to understand these factors or the period covered would not meet their needs, a great potential exists for them to misunderstand the report. As a result, the practitioner may decide not to accept the engagement or to restrict the use of the report. As addressed, the cybersecurity risk management examination Management is responsible for determining whether the examination is performed on an entity-wide cybersecurity risk management program or on only a portion of that program. When making this decision, management needs to obtain an understanding of the needs of intended users of the report and determine whether the subject matter of the engagement are likely to meet their needs. It is possible that in some circumstances, management may engage the practitioner to examine and report on only a portion of the program. The cybersecurity risk management examination may be limited to one or more specific business units, segments, or functions of an entity. Further, the unit, segment, or functions could operate under an entity-wide program or operate under an independent program. The examination may be limited to one or more specific types of information used by the entity as well. As addressed the examination engagement, the practitioner needs to determine whether the subject matter of the engagement are likely to meet the needs of intended users. If the practitioner considers the report addressing only a portion of the program is not likely to meet the information needs of intended users, the practitioner possibly will decline the engagement. If the practitioner decides to accept the engagement and considers that the report may be misunderstood by all but a limited number of report users, he or she may decide to restrict the use of the report to these limited users. When the cybersecurity risk management examination involves only a portion of the entity's cybersecurity risk management program, the language used in the management's assertion and in the practitioner's report should clearly identify the portion of the program addressed in the examination. There may be circumstances in which management may engage the practitioners to examine the report on the suitability of the designs of controls within the entity's cybersecurity risk management program. Such examination is referred to as design-only cybersecurity risk management examination. The design-only examination includes two subject matters. The first one is the description of the cybersecurity risk management program. Another subject matter is the suitability of design of the controls that are implemented within the program to achieve the entity's cybersecurity objectives. Accordingly, the design-only examination will not provide report users with sufficient information to assess the effectiveness of controls within the cybersecurity risk management program. In general, there are two circumstances in which design-only reports might be useful. The first one is related to limited operation time, which means the entity's cybersecurity risk management program has not been in operation for a sufficient extent of time. The second one is sufficient changes made to the program. If the entity has recently made significant changes to its cybersecurity risk management program and the controls within the program, the practitioner does not have sufficient history with a stable program to provide an opinion on the effectiveness of controls to achieve cybersecurity objectives. Before accepting such engagement, it is essential for practitioners to consider the information needs of the report users and whether such users may potentially understand the practitioner's opinion on the description and design-only examination. It is the management's responsibility to have a reasonable basis for its assertions about the description and the effectiveness of controls within the program. It is important to note that the attestation standards do not require the practitioners to perform specific procedures to determine whether management has reasonable basis for its assertions. However, before engagement acceptance, the practitioner generally discusses with management the basis of the assertion and have a better understanding of the entity's cybersecurity risk management program. The implementation of an effective cybersecurity risk management program is a challenging task that requires the design and operation of complex procedures and processes. Because of these complexities, controls within the entity's cybersecurity risk management program are unlikely to be effective without regular monitoring and assessment of controls. Accordingly, monitoring and assessment of controls is a key component of management basis for its assertions. Management generally needs to perform a formal assessment of effectiveness of its controls to make its assertions. In particular, during the assessment process, management needs to evaluate the effectiveness of this entity's procedures for identifying cybersecurity objectives and other assets of the entities at risk and the threats to information and other assets. Management also needs to evaluate the effectiveness of the processes that are used to design and implement controls to mitigate risks. Finally, management is required to assess the effectiveness of controls themselves to provide reasonable assurance of achieving entities' cybersecurity objectives. In general, management's basis for its assertions relies heavily on monitoring of controls. Such monitoring activities typically include ongoing activities, separate evaluations, or a combination of the two. If these monitoring activities do not exist or they appear to be inadequate, it is unlikely for management to have a reasonable basis for its assertion. In the cybersecurity risk management examination, the third parties refers to customers, vendors, business partners, and others who have access to one or more of the entity's information systems, store confidential entity information on their systems, or otherwise transmit information back and forth between or on behalf of the entity. Since potential cybersecurity threats and vulnerabilities could arise from interactions with third parties, it is crucial for management to assess the threats and vulnerabilities related to third parties. It is particularly important when third parties operate controls that are necessary to achieve the entity's cybersecurity objectives. If management believes that the risks associated with third parties are likely to be material to the achievement of the entity's cybersecurity objectives, monitoring controls are necessary. These controls allow management to determine whether the processes and controls performed by the third parties effectively address the identified risks. If adequate monitoring controls do not exist, or if the practitioner believes that such controls are not effective, it is unlikely that the management would have reasonable basis for its assertion. As discussed in Chapter 1, two distinct sets of criteria are used in cybersecurity risk management examination, including description criteria and control criteria. Management is responsible for selecting these criteria and can choose any criteria that are suitable and available to intended users. According to ATC section, suitable criteria should have 4 characteristics, including relevance, objectivity, measurability, and completeness. The relative importance of each characteristic to a particular engagement is a matter of professional judgment. The report users should be able to access the criteria that are included in the description or included in the practitioner's report so that they can understand how the entity has prepared its description and evaluate the effectiveness of controls in achieving the entity's cybersecurity objectives. The AICPA has developed description criteria to help management when preparing and evaluating the description of an entity's cybersecurity risk management program, and to assist practitioners when evaluating the entity's description. The description criteria can be found in Appendix C of the AICPA Guide, Description Criteria for Use in Cybersecurity Risk Management Examination. Since applying the description criteria in actual situation requires judgment, the AICPA also provides implementation guidance for each criterion. However, prior to accepting the cybersecurity risk management examination in which other criteria will be used, the practitioner should determine whether he or she agrees with the management assessment with the suitability of other criteria in terms of relevance, objectivity, measurability, and completeness. The ICPA has also developed control criteria to support management and other practitioners when evaluating whether the controls are suitably designed and operated to meet the entity's cybersecurity management objectives. The control criteria can be found in the AICPA Guide, Trust Services Criteria for Security, Availability, and Confidentiality for use as control criteria in cybersecurity risk management examination. Applying the trust services criteria in actual situations requires judgment. The ICPA also provides points of focus for each criterion. Similar to the description criteria, management may select any suitable control criteria. If the practitioner determines that the selected criteria are not suitable, the practitioner typically works with the management of the entity to determine suitable criteria. If the management refuses to select suitable criteria and available criteria for engagement, the practitioner should not accept or continue the engagement. The cybersecurity objectives established by management need to be suitable to enable both management and practitioner to evaluate whether controls within an entity are effective to achieve the objectives. Management is responsible for establishing suitable cybersecurity objectives to enable report users to understand the context in which the entity's cybersecurity risk management programs operates. In cybersecurity risk management program, control activities are designed and operated to achieve the entity's cybersecurity objectives. Therefore, the practitioner is responsible for assessing whether the cybersecurity objectives established by management are suitable to allow him or her to form conclusion on the effectiveness of control based on the control criteria. In making the evaluation, the practitioner is required to consider the attributes of suitable objectives that are described in the causal framework. According to the causal framework, suitable objectives should have the following attributes, including specific, measurable, observable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. The following basic matters are generally considered when the management establishes the entity's cybersecurity objectives, and they're listed here on the slide. In addition to assist management with the development and disclosure of entity cybersecurity objectives, the description criterion presented in the AICPA guide includes the following example of cybersecurity objectives as implementation guidance, and they're listed here on the slide as well. Generally, in cybersecurity risk management examination, the management tailor those cybersecurity objectives to reflect the entity's business objectives based on the nature of its business and industry, mission and vision, and cybersecurity risk appetite. As discussed before in cybersecurity risk management examination, the practitioner should consider whether the cybersecurity objectives are suitable and complete.